Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Plant Strong podcast. My name is Carrie Smith, and I'm the content editor for Plant Strong. I'm here today with our final episode of 2023. Today, we bring you an encore episode of episode number 91 with Sarah Lynn Grubb. Sarah Lynn and Lisa talk all about Sabbath. And let me tell you, at this time of year, our calendars are full. The holiday season is in full swing, with celebrations and parties and all the school things and all the church things and just all the things. So Sabbath, I think it's something we could really be reminded of. So please listen in to this encore episode with Lisa and Sarah Lynn Grubb.
Well, welcome, Sarah Lynn, to the Plant Strong podcast.
Yay.
Girl, it is so good to have you here today.
It's so good to be here today, Lisa. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh my goodness, listeners, you have no idea. So this lady and I go way back. Let me just ask you, do you have a friend who composed the song that she played that on the day that you walked down the aisle on the piano at your own wedding? Do you have that friend? Well, I do. And Sarah Lynn is that girl. That's how far we go back, plus a lot, actually. But that was a marking moment for me. Anytime I think of my wedding, I hear that beautiful
Lisa song. That's what it's called.
Oh my goodness. So that's what we're working with today. So as you can imagine, we've done a lot of work pre-recording to keep this thing reined in.
Yes.
Because we know ain't nobody got time for the college stories. We get that. But we went to college together. She is younger, so she barely made it in before I made it out. I'll give her that. She's much younger than me, but I am so privileged that she could join us today. And it means a lot to me personally, but what I'm more excited for is what you listeners are going to gain from it. I just know that you're going to enjoy it so much. So, dear friend, we're going to jump right in. I want you to start us off, give us a quick tour through your life and ministry and church planting in order to kind of set the stage for the rest of our conversation.
Okay. Well, Lisa and I, from the same background, so much respect for her family, love for her brother. Her husband grew up 20 minutes away from me. Our dads were pastors in the same area. Anyway, so much history and love. So I grew up a preacher's kid. We didn't say pastors, preacher's kid back in the day. And in Portsmouth, Virginia. And I started playing piano really early. I was 4 years old when I started taking lessons. So that led to being 8 years old playing for the choir and 10 years old playing for church. So I grew up with hymns, but I was always behind a piano, not in a leadership role. And my mom was the essence of the Southern pastor's wife, serving people and loving people. And I was very blessed to have parents that were the same. My dad was the same on stage as he was off stage. There was not, he practiced what he preached. And I'm very grateful for that. But I didn't see women in ministry. So I loved missions. I thought I was going to go on the mission field overseas. But I knew there was a stirring in me for more than what I had seen in ministry. And so not going to go into this whole story, but I ended up transferring to a school in Texas, Abilene Christian University, my junior year. And I was studying classical piano. And before this point, I had, like I said, I played in church. I led worship at camps. And, but I never considered myself a worship leader. And no joke, an a cappella Church of Christ pastor heard me sing at an event, and he came up to me. My aunt worked for him, and he's like, "You're a worship leader, and I want you to come lead at our church, lead our student ministry." Wow. And he's the first person that called me a worship leader. And I remember I said, "No, I'm not a worship leader. I just play the piano and I sing sometimes." Like, I just didn't make the connection because it's 1997, 98. Like, that just wasn't a thing. So 22 years later in ministry, that conversation changed the trajectory of my life. My husband and I moved to Oregon, lived there for almost 10 years and helped plant a church. And we did everything, I was the church secretary for quite a few years from our home. I led worship. We led small groups. My husband was the student pastor. Then he was executive or associate pastor. So 10 years full. We had our beautiful kids there. And then an opportunity opened for me from our dear friend, Mike Clear, mutual friend, to
Shout
come
out.
lead worship at Discovery Church in Simi Valley. And one thing led to another. They offered me a job, and our whole family left Oregon and moved to Southern California. Not a part of my life plan, I'd say. I never saw that coming, but I'm so grateful I had a husband that was willing to take a back seat in ministry as a pastor and say, God is leading our family and opening this door for you. And so we went for it. Now, 11 years later, he's the campus pastor at our church. We merged with Real Life Church in Valencia. So we're now Real Life Church Simi Valley. And so all the things, it's been a crazy ride these last 22 years in ministry. I did not have sabbaticals modeled for me. I believe my dad took one at his 25-year anniversary at our home church in Portsmouth. Shout out to West Park Church of Christ. And they honored my parents, and he went away for a month, and just so great. But my parents just, they kept going. You know, we take we take a week vacation every summer to go to the mountains to visit my mom's family. And we take a 3-day vacation to go to Delaware to see my dad's family. Like, we just kept going. And so I talked with you and Jeff about this when you guys were out this summer, like, we're in it for the long haul, and what helps a leader stay in it in ministry for the long haul. And I realized that with just all the changes that happened in ministry, our church had gone through a lot of changes, throw in a pandemic, throw in my kids growing up and being, 16 and 18. And I'm like, my identity is shifting on so many fronts.
Yeah.
My heart, I needed a reset. And I felt like I'd gone toward burnout, but I never wanted to use that word. I don't know. I just was wrestling. I knew there was something in me that needed to rest before I hit that point.
I'm going to stop you right there. I'm going to ask some questions. So I think I love how you framed this with your family, because again, if we had time, it is kind of freaky, the parallel journeys. And really, my husband, Jeff, the three of us have an incredibly similar, going way back to even our parents' training and ministry. So it's a beautiful similarity. And you mentioned that the reason, you didn't really see sabbatical modeled, and you were sensing in your spirit some need for some proactive care before burnout. But I think it's important to note, none of the three of our sets of parents ever burned out. And so it is real easy for somebody to go,
I know.
Well, what in the world are you talking about?
What's wrong with you?
You're obviously doing something wrong. You are subpar because your parents didn't necessarily model it. They also, it would seem, didn't need it. Therefore, that builds a case for, if you're doing it right, then this whole self-care model, maybe it's just a little off base. And is it really scriptural? And so that's not our purpose for today. It's not a debate. And I think I've made it very clear. And if not, let me do so now. Just as Sarah Lynn has just described her family and her love for them, that's exactly where I sit. And that's exactly where my husband sits with our growing up. But the fact that we're still in ministry is a tribute to our parents. What they proclaimed on a stage is exactly who they were behind the scenes. So there is no incongruence there, but that's still, from where I sit and what I've studied, I would use our parents maybe as the exception, because what I equally have in large measure are examples of situations that did not turn out as our families did. And so I'm not here to point out the negative, but let's be careful when we use the example of a beautiful story of ministry and service, and maybe not resting in the way that we think could be available to them. And yet they still are passionately chasing after Jesus. That doesn't have to still frame the way it should always be done. So we want to make that clear from the outset.
For sure.
And So what I want to know is, and maybe you're getting ready to tell us this, what was that final thing that pushed you? Because you were aware of sabbatical as a concept. Your dad had taken somewhat of one after like 25 years of ministry. So where in all that did you find in your headspace or heart space the ability to go, this is something I want to pursue, and I think it's the right thing to pursue?
Yeah. I'm trying to think back. When the pandemic hit, just like every church leader, pastor, planner, I mean, we went into go mode. And I remember our kids saying, wow, everybody else's parents are home and they're hanging out and playing games. And
interesting.
You guys are on.
Like, if anything, you're working harder, because we know what pandemic did to ministry places, spaces.
And so our production team went into full effect. And so I would, go into our Valencia campus, which is it's not far, it's 30 minutes away, but weeks of just prepping with our team and Rusty, our pastor, recording, finding different sites to record, all the mandates with, all the medical. I mean, it was just like getting everything online, having Easter online. We have a church with 4 campuses, 5 now, but at the time there were 4. I mean, it was like crazy. And so I thrived in that. I enjoyed, I had a great leader above me, like our team really bonded. But you can only do that for so long without taking a break. And I just had felt that coupled with, some identity issues in my heart. I think I'd shared earlier, like our son was about to graduate from high school and our daughter started driving and didn't need me as much. I'm a worship leader, so I'm used to being on stage. And as much as we really have to guard our identity, not being caught up in what we do in ministry, and especially when you're on stage, God had been working in me for a couple of years, really letting me start to release that position in my heart and done the work in me with my identity. So I think all of those things just wound up. And the final thing was our son is going to school in the Netherlands. And when he graduated, he was leaving in August. And I just remember thinking, I'm going to lose it. Like I need space. I need a break, and I'm going to ask. And it was hard. I'm a 6 on the Enneagram. If you're familiar with the Enneagram, I wrestle with a lot of fear, a lot of, what do you think about me? What if this goes wrong? How can I ask for us? Like I didn't feel worthy, and it felt, I don't know, it felt a little frivolous to ask for it, but I knew in my heart, Lisa, I needed it. I have seen too many people, and not just in ministry, but in life, get bitter and walk just limping around in hurt and pain, and not dealing with the things that are going on in their heart and their mind. So
I love it.
So I asked, good. I went for it.
Okay. So I want to come back to that, the fact that you ask, but so there's a couple things that I'm thinking as you're processing out. First, as you talked about your identity, and, I want to be involved in the conversation to the point that's helpful for listeners. I too, when we planted our church in 2004, prior to that, my identity in a space of ministry looked polar opposite of what I ended up being, the spaces I was filling in our church plant. And that's a conversation for another day. But I did have the sense enough to acknowledge in the moment with a couple trusted friends, whoa, I am battling some stuff of like, I thought I knew who I was. Am I really? Was that for pride? Doing a lot of stuff in my head. In hindsight now, in 2022, and really when I was doing work a few years ago, I realized I would have benefited everyone if I had taken a pause and dealt with that.
That is so good.
It would have not been selfish. It would have been super helpful for my husband, my kids, my coworkers, my launch team. It wasn't anything like overt that was all at one time, but it was just like this residue of some confusion and resentment. And so I think identity being cued into when we wrestle with that, some of it is just day to day. We get that. But if it feels more significant, that can be a real red flag that you would be really wise to lean into and get some feedback and potentially some time away from it all to do this work.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So I wanted to definitely mention that. And then the other thing that I want us to do before we move forward with it is just to take a pause. So some of you that are tuning in may have heard, sabbatical may be familiar. Others, you may not know. Like I certainly did not know anything about sabbatical until I was grown, like years grown. I don't even know at what point, but it was just not something I was familiar with. So to be clear, it is defined, a sabbatical is defined as any extended period of time from one's customary work, especially for rest, to acquire a new skill or training, etc. Typically, it's considered in the 4 to 8 week range. And in academics, it can be as long as a year. Most commonly, that is where it's seen in higher education and institutional careers such as, academics and science. Like a professor will be given a year sabbatical, though ironically, I've talked to a few very recently, and they told me that when they're given a sabbatical, most often it's to work on a like a dissertation, a project, a program that they're developing. So one professor even told me he has opted to never take one because he's already carrying so much. Why in the world would he step away from the work that he's going to still kind of have when he comes back to do more work in a completely different arena? So respect to all of those who are in different career paths, but that kind of brings us up to speed. I also want to pause here and acknowledge that sabbaticals are not the end all be all.
They're not it's not a magic pill. No.
Please hear us in that. This is not even a right or wrong thing. Let there be no doubt about that. It can simply be a helpful tool in one's toolbox, but a tool that does not necessarily indicate that you are lacking if you never use that tool. Our invitation to you is to consider it. Consider it as a tool in the toolbox, whether it's a familiar one or not. It's a conversation that happens regularly around Stadia with our church planters, because the collective experience of those of us who work kind of behind the scenes with Stadia has revealed how helpful preventative care can be. So I just felt like it was a necessary disclaimer to put in there. I don't want you guys tuning out going, that's not even attainable or something in my realm of influence. We're not going to camp out on sabbatical our whole time, but we are, the title, it says nitty gritty. So we're going to give you some of that, and then we're going to move on to some more generalized principles. But with that being said, Sarah Lynn, I would love for you to spend a few minutes sharing some of the specifics of what your sabbatical looked like, thus the nitty gritty. I want to know, I don't know about everybody else, but when I hear about something that feels a little, maybe kind of a luxury or something that I have no history with, I want to know what you woke up and did each day. What does that look like for you?
Yeah.
So how long was yours? Remind us of that.
It was 45 days.
Okay.
Of rest. Yeah.
Okay.
And a mentor of mine, I went to see her, the second weekend of my sabbatical for a couple of days, and we're sitting out, and she just asked, what do you want to get from this? And I just said to her, I want to get out of the way, out of my head, out of my overthinking. I want to accept how I'm wired, who God has called me to be, so I can serve others in the church better.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to sound noble. I'm not trying to sound, I was so, I don't know if it's just a 6 or if it's because I wrestle with anxiety, but I can feel I can think of it just like this bundle, like there's so many things to do. And when you're planning a service each week, 7 days, like there's no end to that rhythm.
The wave starts right back up as soon as
Sunday
Sunday
my
morning
gosh,
is
it just
over.
keeps going and going and going. And I've been doing it for so long. And I'd had taken breaks. I've worked for some amazing pastors and amazing leaders that have allowed me to take breaks.
Of course.
I'm not a martyr, but I just knew I just wanted to get out of the way because I just turned 45 this past month. And so I was 44 when I took my sabbatical. And I say that because I'm like, I just want to get out of the way and serve. And like I said, I want to be in it for the long haul. And so my goal was to rest in the Lord, to do a lot of listening, to practice just the spiritual practice of solitude that I had not created into my everyday rhythm. But we're going to talk about rhythm for our everydays in just a minute. But what my days look like. So, I had made a plan and I was like, well, I'll study this, I'll do this. And a week before my sabbatical, my boss said, no, Sarah Lynn, I want you to rest. I want you to wake up every day and ask the Lord, what are we going to do today? She's like, I know you have some trips planned. We went to a week of intense counseling that was just phenomenal. But the goal was to rest, to replenish my heart, my soul, my mind, my vision, and the calling on my life for ministry. So I got to spend a lot of time with me. I like the anxious, like acknowledge I'm an anxious, awkward, fun mom, wife, worship leader, woman, daughter, child of God. Like I'm all these things and he loves me just the way that I am. Like God is so good. I could never sing another song. He still loves me. I could never plan another service or do another thing. And I am loved by God. It gave me time to mourn the dropping off of our son, our 18-year-old at a university in Rotterdam, in the Netherlands. I knew I was going to be tender coming off of that trip. It gave me time to take my daughter to the beach, to go to the movies, to shop. So it was absolutely a gift, but each day did look a little different. Like I said, I had it mapped out. It was 45 days. My husband and I went to a week in Florida at Blessings Ranch, which was such a gift, Lisa, to really just dig deep into some of our wounds as a couple in ministry, to really dig deep into some of my fears, why I hold myself back from moving forward in what God has called me to do. And that was just amazing.
I got to just pause there because we have huge shout outs to Blessing Ranch. I cannot even list for you the number of how many of us in Stadia universe have been incredibly changed by our time at Blessing Ranch. Literally, I'm trying right now to even think of a person that's not been there. And the beautiful thing about that is it doesn't mean there was crisis. Again, it's preventative care. When Jeff and I went years ago in, I think it was 2011, we were not in a crisis moment at all. We just were kind of next season planning. Now, while we were there, some cray raised up from underground that I didn't know I was dealing with, which thank goodness, so just cannot say enough about spaces like that, and really grateful for the work that they do out there.
So Dr. Charity Byers, the biggest takeaway for me, this is such a simple sentence, but she said, Sarah Lynn, there is room for imperfection.
So good.
I know it's like not rocket science, y'all, but I wrestle so much with everything having to be perfect, in our services and the way that I sing and the way that I lead and there is room for imperfection. So and my word this year is grace, Lisa. And so when I find myself coming up this imperfection trail for just a second, when I find myself, should I have just said that? Was I too vulnerable? Did I sound like an idiot? Whatever. I literally see the word grace flash in front of my mind. Like I say, grace over yourself. If someone cuts me off in traffic, if someone is not kind to my daughter, if someone's not, to my husband, like grace for, I'm not sure what's going on in that person's world before I make judgments, grace. So
that's so good.
That week at Blessings Ranch was so good for Matt, my husband, and I just to be together and to really deal with some things and listen. One of the practices she had us do was just an afternoon to go and spend awkward amounts of time just sitting and listening to the Lord. And he didn't just speak to me. Like I didn't have a lot to write. I'm gonna be real. Like that's the nitty gritty. Like I didn't have this like, oh, moment from heaven. But I just wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote. And, the next day as we were processing it, I did start to see some themes come out in my writing, some calling, that I needed to acknowledge, and that took a lot of courage to say, you know what, I want to coach. I want to teach. I want to do more than I've already done. And so I was able to kind of map that out with Dr. Byers and Matt. So anyways, that was a big part of the sabbatical. Right. I listened to a lot of podcasts, Lisa, and I walked a lot. I'm a big walker. I'm that crazy mom that's walking in the neighborhood with my little fanny pack. I'm just kids, but I don't even care because I'm just listening to stuff. And one day I was listening to a Jen Hatmaker podcast. She was interviewing Amy Grant. And just to hear some of Amy Grant's
the OG, like, for you and me, at least.
I still see her record, and
I see it.
Thy Word, so good, and all the things she's gone through. But she mentioned this journal called a 5-minute journal, and it's so simple. That right here, it's intelligentchange.com. But it's spend 5 minutes every night and every morning. You don't have to have the journal, but I bought it, and I really I'm a tangible. Like, I like to journal. And it's just starting the day with gratitude and with intention. What would make today great? And this is something I was not used to, and that's daily affirmations. But coming off of my time with Dr. Byers, I realized that I need to tell myself, Sarah Lynn, you're a leader. Sarah Lynn, you belong. Sarah Lynn, when you show up, God uses you. Don't live in fear. So anyways, I do it now almost every day. 5 minutes at night. And then at the end of the day, 3 good things that happened. How was your day? And then what could have made today better? I love that, because it's not about perfection. We're on a journey where we are living life, and it's in real time, and stuff happens. And I'm not wrapping up a bow at the end of every one of my days, y'all. Right. Like, there's something like, I really screwed up on that one.
Right. That was a bust.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. But that was a great tool that I picked up of my sabbatical. Let's see, because I am by nature an overthinker and an anxious person, I instead of ignoring it or trying to deny it, my counselor has been like, Sarah Lynn, this is who you are. And you are going to, every day, he calls it baking your cake. He's like, every day, it's like, you know who you are, you know how you're wired, but you need to go on your walks. You need to spend time with the Lord. You need to do things that help you refuel you.
Like giving you the permission that you already know. You have the answer of what makes your day great.
Don't be ashamed, because, fear comes knocking at your door. Don't be ashamed and think, what, can I not overcome this already, God? Like, I'm not in heaven yet. I'm not perfect. There is room for imperfection. And God will use my insecurities or my anxiety, my fear. He uses those things to remind me he's God and to help point people to him. Counseling is another. So I can't speak enough.
It's another ingredient in that cake, baby. Let me tell you, it's a large portion of my cake. I will tell you that.
It really is.
Yeah.
But it wasn't modeled for us, Lisa. And
right.
And I am choosing not to live in that. Okay, it wasn't modeled, and maybe my parents don't understand, and that's okay. They love me the way that I am.
Of course.
I know I want to be the best version of myself, not for me. But it's from a posture of God. I want to get out of the way so I can serve you. So I needed some work in my life in those areas.
I love that. And I love that. So I was prepping for today, I think it kept popping in my mind that because we're going to move into Sabbath as a rhythm, but it's like sabbatical can be a reframe. So it is some time off. It looks different. It's not one exact way, but I just want to encourage our listeners, do not check out on that part of this conversation because you think it'll never happen, or there's never going to be the money, or there's not the money, there's not the time. We see that, we respect that. We do not downplay that, but just promise us that you'll put a little pin in it and be willing to have either be a part of some conversations or invite some conversations on your own. that just keep it kind of in your periphery, not something that you're focused on. And so, but what I'm hearing from you is it gave you the space to know that, and even a 2-week sabbatical, guys, can be amazing, because it's 2 weeks that you don't have that wave that's coming, that's building as soon as Sunday morning is over. Not that Sunday morning is everything, that it shouldn't be, but for a worship leader,
you give
or someone who's doing specific Sunday morning, for a children's minister, for the preacher, obviously the speaker, that Sunday morning wave, we can pretend like it's not there, but it is always there. So even like a 2-week reframe, different than a vacation. So that's all. We're not gonna beat that drum. We're not trying to build a case to convince you, but we would love to invite you into that kind of thinking. So we're gonna shift now, though, to that concept of sabbatical could be a reframe. Sabbath is a rhythm. And this, we are not giving you a free pass on. Again, we're not going to get legalistic, because that's where, for me, again, growing up, Sabbath was not talked about. And kind of wasn't necessarily leaned into, because you had projects to get done, housework, chores, kids running around, whatever. So again, we're not going to get legalistic, but we are going to talk about rhythms and what that looks like for you. And then prayerfully, that can be tools that help other people kind of get in that space. And we say it all the time, but we're going to say it again. Information we share here on the podcast, our prayer is always that is descriptive, not prescriptive. Do not lock yourself into feeling like it has to look a certain way. But we are going to take that next step on this one, give you grace, but no, the grace does not cover you not taking rest. You can figure this one out. Sabbatical may be bigger than what is realistic or even necessarily needed. But Sabbath, I promise you, it is needed, and you'll learn it even more once you start practicing it. So as we shift away from the more structured Sabbath, sorry, too many words that sound close.
I know.
As we shift away from the more structured feel of sabbatical, kind of let's hear what Sabbath looks like for you. Is it a full day? Is it the same day each week?
Not usually.
What does that mean?
Not usually. It's chunks of time for me right now. So I was telling Lisa, today is my Sabbath.
So ironic.
Have a day. I know. And I'm talking about it. And so what does that look like? It's a date day for my husband and me. And we're actually having friends over tonight for dinner. So I will prep for that. And it's things that are bringing joy and refreshing to our souls. Sabbath also, y'all, sometimes just looks like a nap after church on Sunday. Almost every Sunday we take a nap and we just rest. I think it's so important, Lisa, that we know ourselves, how we're wired, what refuels us. I'm a big advocate. And again, I know y'all, this must be nice to do all these things. We find a way to do we find a way to do things that are important to us. Life plan. If you've never done a life plan, that is it was a 2.5-3 day getaway for me with a life plan coach. And this was back in 2017. I share this because she really helped me unpack my whole life, like the themes of my life. And one of the biggest takeaways is how I'm wired and what refuels me. So what's going to look like Sabbath for me may not look like Sabbath for you. And one of the things I need time with the Lord every day. Y'all, I don't always take it. I'm gonna be real. When my kids were little, it is hard when you have 2 kids in diapers. And there's seasons that I wrestled with so much guilt because I couldn't spend, even 10 minutes with the Lord in the morning. It's not about guilt, y'all. It's not about that. You're talking about a life plan. There are daily rhythms and then there's weekly rhythms. And so I just found out, kind of back to baking my cake, like I need to move every day. Like I've got to have some kind of, it may just be walking my dog around the block. I need time with the Lord every morning. And that can be so hard when kids are little in different seasons. And I work a full-time job and it's a lot, but even just finding a scripture that I'm reading, even if it's just I love YouVersion because the scripture pops up every day. Okay, read it. and come back to it throughout the day. Let it sink in and simmer in your heart. Maybe
Yes.
you're a night person. Shoot, that's awesome. Like, do your times the time with the Lord at night. I'm a morning person. That's when I'm the most awake. And so mornings are the time for me. But the life plan just really helped me figure out how I'm wired and what refuels me. Another really important thing with Sabbath is to be on the same page with your spouse.
So good.
You know, Matt and I are in ministry together, and our current roles have us in different parts of our church organization, which is really kind of nice. But it's good just to talk about our weekly plan together. We're not great at taking date nights, but we try to take date lunches or a date day. So that's also a part of just staying connected to your.
But that's also being honest. Instead of going, I mean, why is that less? Why do we feel like we need to say we're not great at date nights?
I know. Because every date night, well,
I know, but that's what we do because we've made this like weird box. The fact that you do a date lunch may be way more in tune with you two as a couple. So I love the freedom of that. That's great.
Yes. So we rest. I already said that. Sorry. Let's skip that part. I'm sorry. I'm getting off here. Let's see.
Oh, you're fine.
I wanted to talk about a couple books that really helped lay the groundwork. Okay.
Let's do that.
So, and some other tools that I've just used along the way. And I realized I read this quite a few years ago, but it really paved the way for not only my sabbatical time, but my weekly sabbatical. And it is The Rest of God by Mark Buchanan.
Hello.
It's an older book. It's like 2006.
It is. He is an OG for sure.
It is so good, y'all. I was pulling it up today. I wanted to share this little part of the section, out of one of the sections. And if you've ever felt like this, then y'all, I know this is not a shame. We need Sabbath if you've ever felt like this. So, I intend to solve problems diligently, preach fervently, care compassionately. I intend to be heartfelt and skillful in the things to which I put my hand, but sometimes I end up with none of that. I end up withered. I spark with dry static. When I'm really tired, I get mildly paranoid. I suspect conspiracies afoot. I start to distrust people. I resent interruptions. I stop caring. I become a master of diversions. I get sloppy and cagey and prickly and forgetful. I clench my jaw too tight, which gives me headaches, which makes me irritable. Wow. We need rest. Every day we need replenishment. Mark talks about how taking a day, he's talking about taking a full day of Sabbath in this book a lot. It's an act of trust. It's an act of trust that whatever I think I have to get done, whatever I think I have to do, the church can't run without me. There's no way I can take a day off. And I never thought about this as pride, y'all. But as I was reading it, I was like, dang, is it pride in my heart? Is a little arrogance? Like they can't do it without me? You know, God could rest for a day after he created the world, but I can't rest for a day doing what my job is like, and the irritability and just the shortness and the distrust. Like if you were feeling that and sensing that on the regular, I just encourage you to really drill in with the Lord. God, you know what I need.
Yeah.
Help me create that space to just let my heart, my soul be replenished. Another tool that has helped me, both big sabbatical and everyday Sabbath, is When the Soul Listens by Jan Johnson. It's really great about finding rest and direction in contemplative prayer. It's amazing. Another book, if you're not sure how you're wired, is Sacred Pathways. There's, I think, 9 different ways that you can discover how you connect with God. Maybe that's a weekly, for me, it's driving to the beach. It's 50 minutes to an hour away. I can't go every week, but when I go, the ocean is like the great reset, y'all. Just sitting on the beach, even if it's, we went on my birthday for maybe an hour. Just sitting there. Just God created nature, and it has an amazing way of just reminding us who we are, reminding us who he is, and allowing us to reset our heart. So those are just a couple of tools that have really helped me in my weekly Sabbath rhythm. What am I doing during that time? They're amazing. So,
and that's so like, I love that you light up when you're talking about it. when do we pay attention to what we light up talking about? Rarely, if we're not doing it very much on purpose. You know, it's so easy. It's just so easy to blow through life. And we keep using this language of luxury and privilege and I don't know, like, and there is, you know, I'm so aware that for a lot of people, it is that, like, they are not going to be able to take the time off from work. Maybe you're listening in and you love church planting and you are all for it. You're on a launch team, or you're the friend of the lead planters, and you've found out about us through them and you're encouraged by this podcast. We don't discount your story either. We get it. That's why extended period of time, we can't let you get hung up on that. We're talking about a habit. Again, Sabbath is accessible. Sabbath is for everyone. Sabbath is a rhythm. That's it. That is it. That's the bar. And then you, Sarah Lynn, specifically have done the work, talking about making that cake. You have done the work, which we can all do. It just, we may not get it all done if we don't have a week to take away. It might be in little 30-minute chunks, which would obviously take longer to discover fully, but it can still be done. It can discover what causes you to light up, and then figure out little tiny bite-sized chunks of ways to incorporate that into your day-to-day.
We all have a sky above us. And I'm sitting here looking out of a window. I mean, even if it's just sitting outside for 20 minutes and just being still with the Lord. God wants to guide us. He is with us. He gave us his Holy Spirit. At least I was thinking the other day, the same power that raised Christ from the dead lives in us. So why am I worried about this? Or, whatever is weighing any of our listeners or you and me down. Like, I think when we lay it before the Lord and we create space every day to surrender to him, he shows up, y'all. He doesn't leave us hanging.
No.
And so that just gives me fuel to keep going. So find your daily rhythm and embrace it. You know, I've found that when I'm intentional is huge. Instead of just letting life happen, I am the best version of myself. I'm more peaceful. I'm more calm. If you're a Myers-Briggs fan, I'm an INFP. And so I can go with the flow. I don't have to have every day mapped out to the T. But as a perceiver, I found that when I do plan my days, I have so much more freedom. Again, I'm being intentional. So I'm not so scattered, trying to pick up everything, but I'm proactive in anticipating the day ahead. So you again, like, you find your rhythm, like read and, again, talk. If you're married, talk to your spouse, because being on the same page is so important. And if you're not married, talk to close friends. Like, it's great to just bounce ideas off of each other. And I don't know, sometimes it's good to know that I'm not alone. I'm not the only one that is trying to figure out, how to find a rhythm in life. I think our friends, our community can often see things in us that we don't see in ourselves as well. And sometimes just hearing, that, I don't know, permission to really find the tools that fuel you. That's how God made you. God, the creator, made you. So we need community around us.
I love it. And I love that piece of finding out that community is part of the journey, because you can isolate off, and not every personality has a strong critical voice inside. Some of us really do. And so I have found, for me, the community piece is like the lifeblood of the process, because if left to just my own reflections, I'm going to almost always, especially in unhealthy seasons, land in a negative space of not enough, do more. Whereas my community that knows me can, if I've given them permission, they can speak into that and go, that is not truth. That is not a true thing that you are playing out in your brain. And so I love that reminder about community. So as we're wrapping up our time, you had shared with me that one of your greatest gains during both the sabbatical journey and the practice of Sabbath is perspective. Tell us a little bit more about that.
I journal a lot. And when I look back in my journals, and they're like prayers to God, I see over and over his hand at work in my life. Mm. And every prayer is not answered the way I want it to be answered, but his faithfulness is constant. And so when I choose today to have a perspective, not a Pollyanna pie in the sky, positive thoughts only perspective, but the perspective of God is at work in my life. I can trust him no matter what. When I set my mind on things above, fix my eyes on Jesus, I'm confident. I'm confident to move in to whatever situation or day, or whether it's a struggle or not. It doesn't always have to be a struggle, right. But I'm moving forward with the Lord. That, Galatians talks about walking in step with the Spirit. And so when I have that that eternal perspective, he has got my life. He has got my kids. He has got my husband. He has got my ministry. He has got me. What am I so worried about? Or what, fill in the blank for your own things, but perspective, lifting our eyes to God and focusing on him. It just changes the game for me. It's made me have just a different outlook on life, Lisa. And, when anxiety creeps up, when that buzz that I feel in my body where I'm like, he's promised to never leave me or never forsake me. Like, man, do I believe it or not, Sarah Lynn? And, I'll wake up at night with anxiety, and that scripture has just been really like, I will never leave you and I will never forsake you. I will never leave you and I will never forsake you. And so I think, the blessing of having that time last fall to just let everything, give up on my striving and cease from all of my working, and allow God to really start to heal and replenish and renew and give me tools to head into this next season. That, coupled with my daily practices, it helps me so much. It just helps me so much be the leader that God has called me to be. So
such a gift.
I'm grateful. Gift. I'm so, so grateful. And it's not everyone can do it. Everyone can take time each day to have these different rhythms, and then take an extended time on the weekend to have fun, to enjoy the Lord, to practice his presence. It's a game changer.
It is. And that is just, I love that we can kind of wrap up with that, because I think it transitions beautifully into this just incredible quote from John Mark Comer, which ties back, to that whole concept of perspective, because that's really it, right? Like it all boils down. Do we believe God to be true to his word? If he is truly enough, it influences every breath, every action, every response, and not in a critical, like, you guys are failing out there way. It just means, what a beautiful invitation. And so kind of to wrap us up today, I'm going to read that quote. So he writes, "That's why Sabbath is an expression of faith. Faith that here is a creator and he's good. We are his creation. This is his world. We live under his roof, drink his water, eat his food, breathe his oxygen. So on the Sabbath, we don't just take a day off from work. We take a day off from toil. We give him all our fear and anxiety and stress and worry. We let go. We stop ruling and subduing, and we just be. We remember our place in the universe so that we never forget. Oh, there is a God, and I am not him. And I cannot think of a better way
that is
to end our time together. Thank you for being with us and for being so vulnerable and transparent with your journey. I love you so much.
I love you too.
Thanks for listening to the Plant Strong podcast. Plant Strong is part of the Stadia podcast network. To find more great podcasts and to see how Stadia can help you start thriving, growing, multiplying churches for the next generation, be sure to check out stadia.org/podcasts.